So let's take a look at where we left off last time. Now, one of the things is I had to actually redo the project because of an error, so it's going to look a little bit different, but essentially the functionality is the same. We have a settings panel here, which we can turn on and off. And we left it off because if I press play here and if I click on settings, it brings up the settings window, but at least notice it deletes the game name thing or it just hides it. And then we also have this where I click X and it brings back the game name and it hides my settings panel. So let's continue on and continue to build on this menu. All right, so let's right click on our settings panel. Let's actually turn this back on and then we'll hide our game title. I'm actually just going to put it here. No, it hides it. Let's put it all the way at the bottom. There we go. And then I'm going to hide this so I can just focus on the settings panel here. And so let's begin by adding a toggle, a music toggle. So I'm going to right click on the settings panel, not the canvas, but the settings panel. And I'm going to go to UI here and I'm going to add a toggle. And for the toggle, we could just scale it up, maybe 2 by 2 by 2. Oops. Let's try that one more time. 2 by 2 by 2. So it's twice the size. And then notice when I move my toggle, the pivot's in the center, which is good. And under the toggle here, we can change the label from toggle to music. You can see it changes the name. And I'm actually going to just copy that for a second, and I'm going to rename my toggle here to music toggle so that I know which toggle this is. I'm going to save that by hitting Control S. All right, so let's take a look at how we can place some music in these settings, and I can toggle it on and off. So right off the bat, you can see I'm on this website called pixabay.com music, and it's a royalty-free site. They have some paid services as well, and they just want you to credit them if you decide to use it for a professional project. For us, because you're just submitting it as an assignment and you'll be using this for, a portfolio piece to apply for potential portfolio, it's a good idea to credit them, but you don't necessarily have to unless you're going to make money. So I'm going to go to the site and then click on music here, and then just pick something that you like. So that sounds pretty good to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and left click and click download here. And you could see it allowed me to download to the desktop, and I'm going to hit save. And I'm just going to close this out. Now, this is where you would credit them as the credit information here. And as I mentioned, it's generally a good idea. I'm not going to be publishing this outside of, and I'm actually giving them credit by showing this when I post this video. So let's return to Unity rather and import in this audio file. And so here we are back in Unity, and what I'm going to do is in the assets folder, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create another folder, and I'm just going to call this one music. And I'm going to right click on music and I'm going to import this new asset, and it's really just going to go to the desktop and bring this in. Now you could delete this after you're done, but I'm going to press play and you can see that I can hear it here. And what I want to do is I'm going to link it up to my music toggle here. And notice down here it says on value change Boolean. A Boolean is this, it's just true or false. So this is on and this is off. So let's take a look at how we can wire this up to our music toggle. And so it's similar to before, I'm going to hit plus here, and I'm going to grab my science documentary music and I'm going to drop it into this folder here. And then under note function, I'm going to go to audio clip. And you can see here there's a string name here. This isn't necessarily what we want. We don't want to just add a string name or an audio clip name here. So, but we want to load this in here. And the way we do that is we're going to actually right click in here and we're going to create an audio and an audio source. And notice that this adds effectively a speaker in our scene. And for the audio clip, I'm going to drag my science documentary in here. Now, what makes this different is now we have full control over this, including turning on and off the audio in our scene, which will give us active to that set active thing. So let's go back to our music toggle here. And instead of grabbing this, let's just call this main menu music, or maybe we can call it like game music. And later we'll write a little bit more advanced code so that we can actually have an audio manager, but for now. So here's our music toggle, and drop it in here. And now when I go to no function, you see we have an audio source, and we actually have something that says we have a active and set active. So you can see here there's a Boolean enabled here. So if we check that, you can see this is our Boolean, and it says audio source dot enabled. You can also go up here where we just have only the enabled here. And what you'll notice, it says audio source enabled here, but we're missing that little component. But what it's going to use is, instead of using that little tick or that check mark, it's going to use the toggle here. So let's go ahead and test this. So you can see in our scene we hear audio, but if I check this, it turns off the audio source in our scene. So those are essentially two ways of, you could do it through code where you add that little enable toggle. I like this way because it uses what's in the scene already, which is this little check mark. So let's go ahead and test the whole thing before we end this video. So here's my settings panel. I'm going to uncheck that. And I want to make sure my game title is on. And I'm going to hit Control S to save this. And let's go ahead and press play. And I'm like, I like this song, but for now I kind of don't want to hear any music. So I'm going to hit settings. And I'm going to uncheck that toggle. And then I'm going to close this. And you can see it stays off. Actually, let's do one more thing. Let's turn our setting panel back on. And let's turn off our game title. Let's actually adjust let's turn on our music toggle too. So here's our music toggle. Let's go ahead and, below our music toggle, let's go ahead and right click on our settings panel, and let's add a UI. And then within that UI, let's add a slider. And this slider is going to be called volume. You can do music volume slider. So maybe we want the music, but we just don't want it to be that loud. So I'm going to go ahead and hit R, scale this up a little bit. Just line it up at the edge here. And then underneath this, you could see there's a slider, a fill area, background, but we don't have a text. So I'm going to right click on music slider, and I'm just going to go to UI and then Text Mesh Pro. I'm going to move this over to the side. And let's actually, here, let's move this over a little bit. Let's scale this down a little bit here. And let's bring this in. And then let's bring this over a little bit like this. And actually, let's hit T and just kind of adjust this overall. T like Tom. And then I'm going to turn off wrap like before, word wrapping. I'm going to disable that. And then notice that my text is kind of off a little bit. Well, if I select my text and I click in here and I hold shift, I can center all of this. So let's make sure, let's hit W and kind of move this over. It looks like our text, let's go back a little bit and to where we were in the beginning, and then let's turn off word wrap here. And then we can go in and hit T to edit this text here. And let's just name this volume. And then I'm gonna hit Control A, Control C, and then I'm gonna rename my text here volume. And like as I mentioned, I'm going to disable that so I can just make this bold, maybe scale it up a little bit. And let's hit T, bring this in a little bit. Let's, again, move all this stuff. And then now that I hit W, you can see we can continuously center it by holding shift and clicking center. So here's our volume. And then this background a little bit here, I'm gonna hit T on that and just move that out a little bit more like this. It's giving me a little bit more space on my volume, like that. All right, so if we press play, what you get is, let's hit settings. Oops, you know what? I did all of that in play mode, so I'm gonna pause the video and redo that. You wanna make sure that you never make changes in play mode because that could, it doesn't recall or save any of your changes. So let me go ahead and pause this and add all that back in. All right, I added that back in outside of play mode. Let's go ahead and have our slider selected, and then we're gonna add component, not add component rather, but we're gonna go up to our volume slider here, and then we're going to add a property here. And this is also gonna control our audio source. So let's find our audio source, which is game music. And I'm going to drag that here. And if we look at our audio source here where it says game music, you can see there's a volume here. And let's see what else. So if we press play, you can hear the music, but I can turn the volume down. So we want to wire it to this area of our audio source. So let's go back to our volume slider up here. And down here, we have game music. And then you can see audio source, which is the component we want. And then you can see, if we go all the way up at the top, there's a volume. And there's also a volume down here, which is if you want to control it with programmatically, you'll see there is, I believe there's a volume down here. I think it's like a float volume. Yeah, it's right here. Sorry, it was just a little hard for me to see. But we want to go with these up here, the dynamic ones, because these are going to be controlled by this. So let's press play again. You can see that takes us to 1, and this takes us to 0. So how do we get it to start at 0? Well, when you go to your game music, take your volume and put it all the way at 0. And then let's go ahead and test this. So, well, actually, you know what? We want our volume all the way at 1. And we want, let's see. Yeah, so if we, yeah, because when you start the game, you kind of want the music going. So let's test this out. Let's turn on our game title and let's press play. And let's click settings. And then this is 1. And this brings it down. You know, what we could do actually, the last thing we could do is actually maybe, let's hide our game title one last time. We have our, let's see, settings panel. We have our volume slider, but remember we dragged this underneath volume slider area. I have my text here. So I'm going to detach that for a second. This just says volume. So I'm just going to attach this maybe to the settings panel instead of the volume slider. But with this volume slider, we could probably rotate this, let's see, maybe this way. I think that makes better sense. So we'll do 180 degrees. And I'm going to hit T, kind of squish this a little bit because it looks a little kind of weird. And now when we press play, we can turn off our music. And we can turn down our music. Oh, you know what? It still works in the same direction. So let's undo that. Let's disregard that change. Actually, I know what the issue is. So here's our volume slider area here. What we want to do is set our game music, because remember, we already have it wired up, to a volume that's not 1. So let's say we want it to start low at 0.25. So let's press play. And now it should increase and it should decrease. And also, let's go to, on our volume slider, we have a value here. Let's set our value to 0.25 too. So now, I think that should wire everything up perfectly. Yeah, so it's starting off low. Yeah, now there we go. So that's kind of our little trick. All right, so let's hide our settings title. Oops, not our title, but our settings panel. And we have our game menu on. Let's test it one last time before we end this video. So we have settings that turn on. You can close this, it brings back our game name. Sorry, one last thing I want to do is, I don't like this background. And so I'm going to select my main camera here, and I'm going to go to rendering, environment, and I'm going to just change it to a solid color. And then that'll give us like, it's a little bit of an ugly background, but maybe we can add some models or something. Ooh, I kind of like that green. Not too bad. I mean, we'll come up with a better background too eventually, but that's it for adding audio or controlling music in your settings.